And welcome once again to Flashpoints. I'm Bob Orr, joined again by Juan Zarate, our national security analyst. Juan, good to see you.
Good to see you, Bob.
Syria. Israel now has taken pretty aggressive action in targeting what they claim were arms shipments or houses for arms shipments. What's going on there?
Well, it's not the first time the Israelis have struck inside Syrian border to go after weapon shipments or threats to Israeli security. They've been very open about not claiming these strikes, but open about the right to defend against the transshipment of missiles, for example, to Hezbollah from Syria, or the movement of chemical weapons into the hands of Hamas or Hezbollah. So the Israelis have made no bones about needing to defend themselves against what comes out of Syria. The interesting thing here is the Syrians have tactically and strategically decided to use this as a moment to really turn this into an attack on Syrian sovereignty and really make this about Israel. And this is why you've seen the Israelis not only not commenting about this, but trying to lower the temperature around this incident.
And on that point, a couple of missiles were lobbed apparently across the border, and Israel didn't react. They didn't take the bait.
That's right. And I think ideally for Assad, what he does is he converts what is a civil war and a fight for his very regime survival into a fight against Israel. Israel has largely stayed out of this. They've largely not been an actor or a source of inspiration in any way or an agent in this fight in Syria. For Assad, if he could turn what's happening to him and his survival into an issue of defense against Israel, that changes the dynamic. You've already seen protests in places like Tehran. You've seen the Turkish government, making statements denouncing what the Israelis have done. So, to the extent that the Syrians can convert this and take pressure off of themselves, that's a huge strategic victory, and Israel wants to avoid that while still defending their interests.
So the Israel thing is a little bit of a sideshow. Back to the main event now in the fight for Damascus and Syria. Mm-hmm. Where is the United States in terms of arming the rebels?
Well, you've heard more talk about the potential to arm rebels, but you still see reticence on the part of the White House to take any overt and clear steps to do that. The major concern still arises. Can you define who the good guys are among the rebels? Can you contain what you send into theater? Let's say sophisticated weaponry, night vision goggles, surface-to-air missiles, which may be very valuable to the rebels. Can you actually contain that so it doesn't get into the wrong hands, including the Al-Nusra Front, which is a branch of al-Qaeda in Iraq? And so the challenge for the administration is, okay, this may sound like a good policy. Senator McCain has been pushing for this for a long time.
Senator Corker also.
Corker as well. But how do you do it effectively, and how do you do it in a way that doesn't lead to more chaos?
Is it even possible, could we even conceivably come up with a plan, a workable plan, where we would arm the rebels but keep all of those weapons away from al-Nusra, the al-Qaeda-linked brigade?
I mean, you could try, and the Syrian rebels have talked about this. You know, they'll return all of them after the fighting. You can register them. But this is war, and the environment's very fluid, so it's difficult. I think the bigger problem here, Bob, is discussion every turn when we talk about what is to be done in Syria. We talk about one particular tactic, and so today or the last couple of days, it's again arming the rebels. Fine. We talk about no-fly zones. Fine. We talk about all sorts of things that can be done. There's no discussion of strategy. And I think the thing that bothers me is, as this civil war continues and Assad survives, there's actually a question in my mind as to whether or not the fall of Assad is the goal. I mean, that's what we've said is the goal. But are we really willing to put our eggs in the basket of his demise? Because I think a lingering problem for the administration is what comes after Assad. And all of these questions about what we do on the front end is actually a question of whether or not we're willing to put capital into his demise.
But can the administration really backpedal from the demands that Assad must go? We've now heard that for over a year and a half.
Well, I don't think they can politically, but I think the environment may shift this. You see Secretary Kerry in Russia today talking with the Russians. The Russians have talked all along about a negotiated solution. Others in the environment have talked about that as well. The Iraqi leader Maliki has talked about this, that there needs to be a negotiated solution, that it's not the fall of Assad that should be the goal, but the end of the violence. And that the longer this goes, the more attractive that tract seems, and the more unwilling we are to actually expend capital and to take some risks here, the more it looks to our friends and allies that we really don't want him to fall. I think that's a real danger.
We
here.
have to wrap this up, but are you saying there's a possible scenario, an endgame scenario, that leaves him with some kind of grip on power?
I don't think that's an American interest. I don't think that's our stated goal, but I think that that is a possibility given where the diplomacy is surrounding this and given all of the negative impact of the ongoing civil war, the refugees, the extremism that is rising, the flow of arms. These are all things that are not good, and you see people looking for alternatives.
Very interesting. What do we do the next time a strong man moves against his people?
You've got to watch the demonstration effect here. Iran's watching, North Korea's watching. This isn't isolated.
Juan, very interesting. Thanks as always.
Thank you, Bob.
And thanks once again to you for watching Flashpoints. I'm Bob Orr. We'll see you next time.